I was sitting near the Christmas tree when my husband, holding the joke tie I had just given him as a gift, looked at the brand new iPhone Pro in my stepsister's fiance's hand and said, loud enough for the whole family to hear, "Your girl knows how to make a man feel special. You should take some lessons from her." A few people let out uncomfortable, polite laughs. My dad told him to step outside and get some fresh air because he'd had too much to drink. He replied that he was just telling the truth. I slowly picked up my phone and stood up. Since tonight is the night for telling the truth, let me make my contribution. Everyone in that living room was dying to know what I was about to reveal. But before I continue, let me tell you how we got here. My name is Lana. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a CPA, the kind of accounting job that no one thinks is glamorous, but it pays the bills really well. Thank you very much. Up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life. My own condo, an above-average salary, and a husband who, in theory, loved me. Yeah, right, my dad, Robert, married Fiona when I was 16. She was beautiful, charming, and knew how to throw the kind of parties that everyone instantly loves. Along with her came Beck, her daughter from her first marriage, who was a year younger than me. We were never genuinely close. It was always that forced, situational cordiality. Thanksgiving, my dad's birthday, Sunday brunches, whenever there was no way out of it. Sometimes I felt like she looked at me as competition, but I'd quickly brush the thought away. You're being paranoid, Lana. I'd tell myself. About 3 years ago, Beck called me. Super excited about some news. Lana, I have this friend I absolutely need to introduce you to. You're going to love him. I swear, he's handsome, sweet. The total package. We should do a double date. You, me, him, and Bradley. No pressure. His name was Joshua, a buddy of hers from college. She claimed that when she thought of who would be a perfect match for him, my name was the first one that popped into her head. I went. Joshua was everything she promised. Tall, bright eyes. The kind of guy who makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room. He asked about my job, my hobbies, and laughed at my terrible jokes so I wouldn't feel awkward. I went home that night with that stupid smile of someone who knows something good is starting. We started dating. He texted constantly. He'd show up with flowers for no reason. He was attentive in a way that felt effortless. The only thing that bothered me a little was his friendship with Beck. It was too close. Late-night texts, college alumni, hangouts without me, inside jokes where I never understood the punchline. Once, I walked into the living room, and they both stopped laughing at the exact same time. It was one of those abrupt pauses that you pretend not to notice, but it just hammers away in the back of your mind for days. I brought it up to him a few times. Joshua, sometimes I feel a little uncomfortable with how close you two are. And he always had a canned response ready. Lana, we've been best friends for years. Don't you have friends like that? Or, you're just being insecure, babe. We're strictly platonic. And I would end up apologizing for feeling the way I did. After a year of dating, he proposed. Down on one knee, a beautiful diamond ring, a speech that I kept locked in my memory for a long time. I said yes. The wedding was simple but gorgeous. 70 guests. A white dress. A reception that went on until dawn. Beck was one of my bridesmaids. She stood right next to me the entire ceremony, beaming. I interpreted it as her being happy for playing matchmaker. Today, I know exactly what that smile meant. The first few months of marriage were peaceful, or so they seemed. Joshua's friendship with Beck remained intense. Texts at all hours, hangouts I only found out about after the fact. But I was a married woman. I had a life to build. And I convinced myself I was overreacting. Until that Friday night in December. We were eating dinner at home. Pasta, red wine, that comfortable couples routine. Joshua's phone was sitting face up on the table, which in itself was highly unusual. He always kept it in his pocket. He was relaxed, in a great mood, talking about a pitch meeting that had gone really well that afternoon. He was a marketing associate. He lived for meetings and PowerPoint presentations, and whenever something went right, he needed to brag to someone. The phone buzzed, and the screen lit up. I saw it for less than a second. "I'm only wearing panties," sent by Beck. My heart started pounding. It was that internal silence that happens when your brain needs a second to process what your eyes just saw. He snatched the phone with a reflex so fast it looked rehearsed. He locked the screen, shoved it into his pocket, and went back to cutting his chicken like absolutely nothing had happened. "My coworker Decker is such an idiot," he said, not making eye contact. "Sent me a dumb meme." As usual, I nodded. Uh-huh. Except I knew there was no coworker named Decker, and I was 99% sure of what I had just read on that screen. We kept eating. He went back to talking about his meeting. He was visibly tense for about 2 or 3 minutes. I noticed, but I played dumb. Then he relaxed and went back to normal, as if the universe had decided to cooperate with him. Right as he was finishing his plate, he casually mentioned he'd promised to grab beers with some buddies and forgot to tell me. He apologized, got up, and went to take a shower. I stared at my plate for an amount of time I can't even quantify. I heard the shower turn on. I walked into the bedroom and grabbed his phone, which was plugged into the charger on his nightstand. I knew his passcode, 1201. I'd seen him type it so many times my fingers did it automatically. The phone unlocked. I opened his messages and tapped on the thread with Beck. The latest messages were, "I'm only wearing panties." Sent by her. "Lamau, you texted right when she was sitting next to me," he replied. "Lana's clueless. She probably didn't even read it." She sent. "Yeah, I don't think she saw it. Otherwise she would have freaked out." "I'm gonna hop in the shower and head over," he replied. I scrolled up the chat. I found photos, so many intimate photos. Pictures of them together in bed, nudes, texts coordinating hotel hookups, dates that perfectly aligned in my head with the excuses he'd given me. Conversations trashing me, Joshua saying he couldn't stand me anymore, that I was boring, vanilla, predictable, that my cooking sucked, Beck agreeing, telling him to just hold on a little longer. I froze at that sentence. Hold on a little longer for what? And then I found the text that completely shifted the axis of my world. It was from Beck, sent a few weeks prior. "Babe, Bradley is a necessary evil. I need to stay married to him for at least 2 or 3 years. Then I'll divorce him, take a couple of properties and a massive alimony check. I'm doing this for us." Bradley was Beck's fiancé, a trust fund kid from a wealthy family. Quiet, serious, the kind of guy who seems too pure for this world. He and Beck had started dating a month before Joshua and I did. Now, they'd been engaged for 3 months. Their wedding was set for next June, and he was nothing but a pawn on their chessboard. Joshua had replied, "I know, but it makes me sick to my stomach picturing you two together. Don't you get jealous imagining me with Lana?" Beck replied. "No, babe. Lol. Lana's pathetic. She's not even in my league," Joshua sent. "True. Plus, she's a dead fish in bed. I avoid it whenever I can." They both laughed. You could tell by the emojis they spammed. Then Joshua said he loved her, and Beck said she loved him. They swapped heart emojis. I was sitting on the edge of the bed where we slept together every night, reading all of this on his phone. I heard the shower turn off. I put the phone exactly back where it was. I sprinted out of the bedroom, locked myself in the guest bathroom, and broke down. Our marriage wasn't spontaneous. Joshua married me out of pure convenience, to stay close to her family without raising suspicion. I was his cover story. Beck was the one who set us up. It was all planned, calculated from day one. From the other side of the door, I heard Joshua yell, "I'm heading out, okay? Don't wait up. I'll be late." The front door slammed shut. I stayed on the bathroom tiles until my breathing went back to normal. Then I grabbed my phone and called Danny. Danny has been my best friend for 12 years. She listened to everything from start to finish without interrupting once. When I was done, there was absolute silence on the line for exactly 2 seconds. Deep breaths. I'm on my way. She got there in under 30 minutes. And she didn't come alone. The woman who walked in with her was a mutual friend of hers, Lauren, a hardcore family law attorney. She spoke with the clinical objectivity of someone who deals with nightmares for a living. She brought a legal pad and sat down at my kitchen table in a way that clearly communicated, I am going to fix this. It was 10 p.m. The house was dead quiet. Spill everything, Lauren ordered. I did. She listened, taking meticulous notes. When I finished, she clicked her pen shut and set it on the table. Point 1, she said. You absolutely cannot confront him yet. Not until we have bulletproof evidence. Not a word. Not a single tell. If he suspects you know, he'll wipe his phone and nuke his cloud before you can document a damn thing. Understand? I nodded. Point 2, do you guys have joint checking? No. We kept our accounts separate and just split the household bills, I replied. She nodded. Money earned during the marriage belongs to the marital estate, even with separate accounts. The money he's blowing on his mistress dinners, gifts, hotel rooms that is called dissipation of marital assets. It's marital funds being drained for an extramarital affair. Judges hate that. She paused, looking me dead in the eyes. But here's the nuke. If he married you while actively maintaining a relationship with someone else, with zero actual intent to honor the marriage vows, that is marital fraud. And fraudulent inducement to marry opens the door for an annulment, not just a divorce. The practical difference? In a divorce, assets acquired during the marriage are chopped up. In an annulment based on fraud, the law treats the marriage as if it never legally existed. Meaning, everyone walks away with exactly what was theirs to begin with. You said you bought this condo by yourself before the wedding? Then he has absolutely zero legal claim to it. She took a breath. But wait, it gets better. Aside from the annulment, you can file separate civil suits against both of them. Against Joshua for fraud, he induced you into marriage under completely false pretenses. That triggers damages for emotional distress and financial loss. And against Beck, for alienation of affection. We live in one of the few states that still allows you to sue the other woman for destroying your marriage. Their behavior was deliberate, premeditated, and malicious. A civil judge will take that heavily into account when calculating punitive damages. I sat there, my brain spinning. What do I need to do? Document every single thing, immediately, Lauren said. Screenshots of the texts, photos, his bank statements, and act totally normal. Don't change your routine. Let's blindside him. Danny and Lauren had a quick cup of tea and left. I went to bed. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how he was with her right now, the two of them probably laughing at me. The naive idiot who bought the Decker the coworker excuse. I pictured the scene. Him walking into her apartment, telling her the story, both of them dying of laughter at the clueless wife. They had no idea what was coming. Joshua stumbled in at 4 a.m. Totally trashed. He tiptoed in, thinking he was being stealthy, went to the bathroom, crawled into bed, and was snoring in 2 minutes. I was wide awake, eyes closed, faking the rhythmic breathing of someone deep in sleep. Once his snoring leveled out, I slid out of bed, grabbed his phone from the nightstand, and walked out. I spent the next hour painstakingly documenting everything. I took pictures of the texts and the nudes using my own phone. I opened his Uber app, a ride to Beck's apartment that very night, and dozens of others I scrolled through, matching the dates. I opened his email and found his credit card statements. $2,000 at a high-end jeweler over the last few months. Jewelry I never received. Michelin star restaurants he never took me to. Boutique hotels. 1800 flowers receipts. I forwarded everything to my personal email in one massive batch. I deleted the forwarding history, went back to the bedroom, and put his phone exactly back on the charger. I got back into bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. In the morning, I emailed the entire file to Lauren. She replied a few hours later. She said we already had enough to file, but the more evidence, the stronger the leverage. She told me to keep playing the loving wife for a few more days, monitor any hidden financial moves, and see if I could catch anything else. I stared at her text. The big Christmas Eve dinner at my dad's house was coming up. Joshua and I were going, as we did every year. Beck and Bradley were going too. I remembered my dad had installed Nest security cameras all over the house a few months ago. He'd mentioned it in passing on a phone call, something about porch pirates and wanting better security. If Joshua and Beck tried anything during the party, a sneaky touch, a compromising look, the indoor cameras might catch it. Maybe I could get the nail in the coffin. For the next few days, I put on the greatest acting performance of my life. I smiled at dinner. I asked him how his day was. I curled up next to him on the couch to watch Netflix. He noticed absolutely nothing different about my demeanor, which, in retrospect, tells me everything about how little attention he ever actually paid to me. Christmas Eve was 2 days away. At my dad's house, there was a tradition. Every couple brought gifts for their partners and family, stacked them under the giant tree. And before the main dinner, everyone gathered in the living room for the exchange. I had bought him an Apple Watch on Black Friday last month, the exact model he'd been begging for. I was so excited when I scored it on sale. I stared at the sealed box hidden in my closet for a long time. You know what? Screw it. He wasn't getting it. On Christmas Eve morning, I drove to a discount department store and bought a $2 polyester tie with a hideous clown print on it. It suited him perfectly. I went home and wrapped it more beautifully than anything I've ever wrapped in my life. Crisp corners, a flawless velvet ribbon, a gold-foiled tag with his name written in elegant cursive. It was a masterpiece. The day arrived. My dad and my stepmom Fiona's house looked like a Hallmark movie, garlands wrapped around the staircase. A massive 1-2-foot tree loaded with ornaments my dad had collected over the decades. Warm white lights glowing in every window. The house smelled like roast beef, cinnamon, and the hot, spiced apple cider Fiona always brewed this time of year. The entire extended family was there. Uncles, cousins, and that one nosy neighbor who crashes every Christmas and no one has the heart to kick out. I greeted everyone with the most serene, relaxed smile I've ever worn. I kissed my dad on the cheek, slid my perfectly wrapped box under the tree with the rest, and went to pour myself a glass of wine. Beck arrived a little later with Bradley. She looked stunning. A deep crimson velvet dress, flawless blowout, and a smile that looked so warm and genuine. She hugged her mom tightly, charmed the aunts and uncles with that effortless social grace I always envied, until I realized it was pure sociopathy. When she got to me, she pulled me into a long, tight hug. "Lana, sweetie, you look gorgeous as always." "Thanks, Beck." "You too." 2 years of absolute betrayal condensed into a 10-second hug. Joshua was hyped up, pacing around the room, a drink permanently glued to his hand. He worked the room, going from group to group, cracking jokes. He'd been pounding drinks since he walked through the door. He and Beck exchanged looks all night. Those quick peripheral glances I had trained myself to ignore, but now saw in high definition. Sometimes their hands would brush when they squeezed past each other in the kitchen. A smothered giggle at an inside joke here, a whispered comment there. I watched the whole spectacle from a distance, feeling a bizarre, icy calmness. I was just taking mental notes, typing timestamps into the Notes app on my phone to pull the security footage later. It was almost time for dinner. But first, the gift exchange. The family gathered in a massive circle around the tree. The adults started passing out the boxes. My dad handed Fiona a small, elegant velvet box. She opened it with her rehearsed, camera-ready smile and gasped, calling it breathtaking, diamond stud earrings. She handed him a sleek leather case, sterling silver cufflinks. My dad kissed her cheek. Then he turned to me. He pulled a small box out of his blazer pocket. I opened it carefully. It was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny engraving on the clasp. He told me he'd had it custom engraved with my name. I had to blink hard to keep from crying right there in front of everybody. Fiona handed Beck a jewelry box. Beck opened it, pulled out a pair of earrings, smiled, and hugged her mom, but her eyes darted straight to the gold bracelet on my wrist. Just for a split second, but I caught it. Beck reached under the tree and pulled out a large box with a massive red bow. She handed it to Bradley. He tore it open. It was the newest iPhone 15 Pro Max. He looked genuinely shocked and thrilled. Bradley then handed her a beige canvas dust bag with a discreet designer logo I recognized instantly. A ridiculously expensive Louis Vuitton bag. Beck opened it and closed her eyes for a second, putting on a perfect performance of being overwhelmed with gratitude. It was my turn. I picked up my beautifully wrapped box and called Joshua over. He practically skipped over to me. The box was the exact dimensions of an Apple Watch. He was certain he knew what it was. You could tell by the smug little smile playing on his lips before he even ripped the paper. He tore into it. He popped the lid. And he just stood there, staring at the polyester clown tie. Seriously, Lana? He held the tie up by 2 fingers to show the uncles standing nearby, letting out a mocking laugh. A clown tie? I don't even wear ties. Especially not garbage like this. I smiled sweetly. Everyone gets what they deserve, honey. Joshua glared at me, his face flushing with anger, and snapped. And that's why you're getting absolutely nothing this year, Lana. The energy in the room instantly flatlined. A few uncles exchanged awkward glances. That sentence carried a completely different weight than normal marital banter. Nobody laughed. Nobody said a word. The silence was deafening enough that Joshua realized he'd crossed a line, and he tried to force a chuckle, pretending he was just busting my chops. Around us, the rest of the family tried to awkwardly resume the gift exchange. Oh, how lovely. Thank you so much. The party tried to limp along, pretending not to notice the radioactive crater in our corner of the room. Joshua looked at the brand new iPhone in Bradley's hand, looked back at the clown tie in his own, and just couldn't help himself. The alcohol had completely bypassed his brain's filter. My wife is such a cheapskate, he muttered, chuckling to no one in particular, acting like the whole room was in on the joke. A few cousins offered pity laughs. An aunt asked me if it was a gag gift. Beck, however, let out a loud, obnoxious laugh, totally in her element. She turned to Bradley. Thank God we're never going to end up like them, right, babe? Bradley offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. And then Joshua, riding high on his 7th bourbon and absolutely devoid of common sense, looked at Bradley's phone, looked at his tie, and projected his voice so the entire living room could hear. Your girl knows how to make a man feel special. You should take some lessons from her. Beck's laugh died in her throat. The fake smile vanished. She shot Joshua a lethal, panicked glare that lasted less than a second but screamed, "Shut up right now." But Joshua was on a roll. The room went dead silent. An uncle muttered, "Oof, that's rough," trying to cut the tension, but it failed miserably. Joshua turned back to Bradley, grinning like he was doing a stand-up routine. So, Brad, want to trade? Bradley stared at him. Then he looked at Beck. Then he looked down at his shoes. No, he said, deadpan. Nobody laughed. Joshua, completely oblivious to the sheer horror radiating from the family, kept performing for his imaginary audience. Honestly, I deserve a medal for marrying her. My dad set his crystal glass down on the coffee table. He looked at Joshua with a terrifying, absolute calmness. The calmness of a man who has reached his absolute limit. Joshua, that's enough. Step outside. You're drunk. Joshua threw his hands up in mock surrender, flashing a sloppy, arrogant grin. Chill out, Pops. I'm just speaking the truth. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. I'd been standing there, sipping my wine, quietly observing. I'd had a little more to drink than I normally would. Not trashed, but enough that my own filter was slipping. I'm only human. I stood up straight. The truth? My voice came out much steadier and colder than I expected. Are you absolutely sure you want to talk about the truth tonight, Joshua? The ambient chatter in the room completely died. Every single pair of eyes locked onto me. Some looked hungry for the drama. Others looked terrified. My dad had this look on his face like he didn't know what the bomb was, but he knew the timer had hit 0. Joshua still had that stupid smirk on his face, assuming I was about to start a petty couples fight that he could easily win. I found out a few days ago that my loving husband Joshua and my sweet stepsister Beck have been sleeping together for years. Graveyard silence. Beck and Joshua shot each other a panicked, involuntary look. It was exactly the kind of microscopic reaction that confirms everything without a single word. Bradley, poor guy, just stood there with his drink suspended in midair, his brain crashing. Are you insane? Where are you getting this? Beck shrieked. Her voice was perfectly calibrated, pitchy enough to sound deeply offended, but vibrating with raw terror. I didn't even look at her. I unzipped my purse, pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and started reading. I read their text messages out loud. My voice was loud, clear, and perfectly paced, so the whole room could absorb every single syllable. Joshua saying he couldn't stand me, that I was vanilla and boring. Beck telling him to just hold on a little longer. And then I read the manifesto, the master plan. You need to stay married to her. She's our alibi. We get to be around each other without anyone suspecting a thing. After I get my divorce, you file for divorce too. Take whatever you can from her, and we run off together. It's foolproof. The living room felt like a vacuum. She's lying! Beck screamed, jumping to her feet. She's making this all up. What is wrong with you, Lana? I ignored her and kept reading. Babe, Bradley is a necessary evil. I need to stay married to him for at least 2 or 3 years. Then I'll divorce him, take a couple of properties and a massive alimony check. I'm doing this for us. The silence that followed that specific text was different. It was heavy, suffocating. Bradley slowly walked toward me, his face completely drained of color. He held out his hand without saying a word. I handed him my phone. Brad, it's not true. Beck was hyperventilating now. She must have faked it. She used AI or an app to ruin our engagement. She's always been jealous of me. Joshua pointed a shaking finger at me. That's a felony. You hacked my phone. I'm going to press charges. Beck discreetly elbowed him in the ribs. Shut up, you idiot. Bradley stood there scrolling, reading screenshot after screenshot. He was reading with the desperate focus of a man looking for a typo, a wrong date, anything to prove this was a prank. But he recognized her texting style, the specific emojis she favored, the slang that was uniquely hers. He went pale white. He handed my phone back to me. He looked at Beck for a long, agonizing moment. Then he picked up the brand new iPhone Pro she had just given him and dropped it onto the coffee table with a loud thud. He looked at her left hand. The ring! Beck! Take it off! Beck froze. The ring. Now, her hands were shaking violently as she slid the massive diamond off her finger and placed it next to the phone. Bradley picked up the ring, grabbed the Louis Vuitton bag he had just gifted her, turned on his heel, and walked toward the front door. Brad, wait! Beck chased after him. It's a lie! She made it up! You know me. He didn't break his stride. Brad, please! Her voice cracked into a real sob. You know I love you! This doesn't make any sense! He stopped with his hand on the doorknob. He didn't look back, but he turned his head just enough for her to hear him. I never want to see your face again. The heavy oak door slammed shut. Beck stood there staring at the closed door for 2 seconds. Then she slowly turned to face me. The look in her eyes was pure, unadulterated hatred, the primal fury of someone who just lost the lottery ticket and needs to physically destroy whoever tore it up. She started marching toward me, and then Joshua stepped in front of her. He threw his arms out wide like he was the romantic lead in a movie and made the single stupidest decision of his entire life. He puffed out his chest, looked at Beck with an expression that his alcohol-soaked brain probably thought looked incredibly brave and heroic, and said, Well, since it's all out in the open now, We don't have to hide anymore, Beck. I'll file the divorce papers tomorrow, and we can finally be together. Beck stopped dead. She looked at him. The expression on her face stripped away every layer of the sweet girl facade. It was sheer, naked disgust. The kind of revulsion that doesn't need to be explained. Are you literally brain dead? Her voice was a low, venomous hiss. Do you honestly think I want to be stuck with a broke loser like you? Joshua's jaw went slack. You could practically see the reality crashing down on him in slow motion. His eyes welled up. And then he completely shattered. He started bawling, screaming through violent sobs. I waited 5 years for you. And this is it. I'm a broke loser. You are exactly like your mother. You're cut from the exact same cloth. You're both gold-digging leeches who use men and spit them out when you're done. My dad stood up. He planted both fists on the dining table with a menacing slowness that was way more terrifying than if he had screamed. What exactly do you mean by that? Joshua. Utterly broken, completely unhinged, and with absolutely nothing left to lose, locked eyes with my dad. Do you want to know whose master plan this was, Robert? He pointed a shaky finger at Fiona. Your lovely wife. She was the one who told Beck I wasn't good enough, that I was too poor, that I had no future. She told Beck she deserved a man who could fund her lifestyle, and that Beck needed to do exactly what she did to you. My dad froze. Yeah. Joshua spat out. Fiona hooked a rich guy, got comfortable, and coached her daughter to do the exact same thing. He paused, wiping snot from his nose. You know what she told Beck? Word for word. I memorized it because Beck cried to me about it. She said, Sweetheart, find a man who can afford you. And if you have time, find one you actually like. Fiona's face was made of stone. She didn't blink. Fiona ordered Beck to go find a walking ATM. Joshua continued. But we were in love. We didn't want to break up. So Beck hatched a plan. I would date someone in the family circle so I'd always be around. That way we could go to dinners, go on family vacations, and nobody would ever ask questions. He looked at me for a split second. That's why I was handed to Lana. My dad turned his head toward Fiona so slowly it looked painful. He dragged his hand down his face like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. Fiona knew everything, Joshua sneered. She knew from day one, and she fully endorsed it. He stopped crying, and a cruel, petty smile crept onto his face. But wait, there's one more thing, Pops. 5 years ago, Beck and I got into a massive screaming match. We were on a break. I called Fiona, begging her to be the mediator, to talk to Beck for me. Fiona bolted up from her chair. Stop it! Stop talking right now! You're drunk and you're making things up! This is absurd! Joshua swatted the air like he was batting away a fly, not even looking at her. She told me to come over for a drink, said she was going to give me advice on how to win Beck back. He paused dramatically, and we ended up screwing on your living room rug that night. The entire house gasped. My dad looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Liar! Fiona shrieked, pointing a manicured nail at Joshua. That is an absolute lie. You have zero proof of that. If I've never seen you naked, Joshua said with a chilling, psychotic calmness. Then how do I know about the dark purple birthmark right next to your tailbone? Dead silence. Fiona opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She snapped, her jaw shut. I just stood there watching the carnage, unable to fully process what I was seeing. This Christmas Eve was spiraling into a dimension I hadn't even prepared for. I just wanted proof to secure an annulment. And instead, I was watching an entire dynasty collapse on live television. Even I didn't know about the birthmark. Joshua could only know that if he'd seen it firsthand. Mom? Beck's voice was completely unrecognizable. The calculated poise was completely gone. I cannot believe you did that to me. Fiona turned to her daughter. The look she gave her was absolute sub-zero ice. Oh, shut up, Beck. Stop being a hypocrite. You are exactly like me. Stop pretending you're some victim here. Beck stared at her mother, completely paralyzed. You absolute whore. Beck spat. Simple, direct, loud enough to echo in the rafters. "And I suppose you're the Virgin Mary?" Fiona shot back without missing a beat. And then it went nuclear. The two of them started screaming at the top of their lungs. Plates were rattling on the table. Uncles were physically stepping between them to keep them from pulling each other's hair. My dad was standing alone in the center of the room, looking at the wreckage of his life. My dad snapped. He marched over to Joshua, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and physically shoved him out the front door with a terrifying, violent strength I never knew he possessed. He slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. Then he turned to the living room. "The party is over." His voice was low, controlled, but carrying a deadly undercurrent. "Thank you all for coming. The show is over. Get out." Nobody needed to be told twice. The aunts and uncles silently scrambled to their feet, grabbing coats and purses with that awkward, desperate hustle of people who just want to survive the blast radius. Within 5 minutes, the house was totally empty. Beck grabbed her coat and walked out without looking at anyone, slamming the door behind her. My dad walked back into the living room and stared at Fiona, who was sitting in an armchair with her arms crossed. "I want a divorce. Pack a bag and get out of my house tonight." She refused. She jumped up and got right in his face. She shoved him hard in the chest. He stumbled back and hit his shoulder hard against the doorframe. I already had my phone dialed. I stepped into the hallway. 911. "What is your emergency?" I kept my voice low and rapid. "I need officers at this address. Domestic violence in progress. Physical assault." I hung up and walked back into the living room. The situation was completely volatile, and I knew it wasn't going to end without handcuffs. Fiona was far from done. Fueled by expensive wine and 15 years of repressed toxicity, she completely unraveled. "You know what, Robert?" She flipped her hair back with a terrifying theatrical laugh. "Yeah, I cheated on you. I've been cheating on you since the day we got married, and your dumbass never suspected a thing. 15 years, Robert, 15 years of me sleeping around while you snored happily in your king-size bed." My dad took a step toward her, but she didn't flinch. "I slept with Joshua." "So what?" "I slept with the yoga instructor, too. The one who was 30 years younger than you and actually knew how to touch a woman, something you never figured out." She tilted her chin up proudly. "You never satisfied me, Robert. Never. I had to outsource what you were completely incapable of providing." She let out a cruel, mocking cackle. "Did you honestly think I loved you? You stupid old man." She threw her arms out wide, gesturing to the grand living room, the vaulted ceilings, the expensive art. "I was in love with this. With the real estate, the European vacations, the diamonds, the black Amex, the lifestyle I couldn't afford on my own." She sneered at him. "But you? Never. I had to endure a fat, aging bore for 15 years. 15 years, Robert. And now you think you can just toss me out into the street like garbage?" My dad opened his mouth to say something, but Fiona didn't let him. She lunged at him like a feral animal. She started swinging wildly, slapping his face, clawing at his chest, screaming that she wasn't going anywhere, that half of everything was hers, and that he had no right to kick her out after the sacrifices she had made. My dad was just holding his arms up, grabbing her wrists, trying to defend himself without hurting her. That's when the doorbell rang. The police had arrived. Fiona was still screaming and violently fighting my dad's grip when the cops breached the door. The officers physically separated them immediately. One cop barked at everyone to step back and began assessing the scene. The other officer walked over to me. "Ma'am, did you witness what happened?" "Yes, officer," I said calmly. He asked her to leave the property. She refused, became violent, and attacked him, slapped him repeatedly, and shoved him into that doorframe. Outside on the porch, Fiona was screaming hysterically that it was a lie, that she was the victim, that my dad had threatened her, and that everyone in the house was conspiring against her. My dad walked up to the commanding officer. His voice was dead calm, even though his face was flushed and bore the red marks of her fingernails. "Officer, I discovered tonight that my wife has been committing adultery for years. I asked her to vacate the premises. She refused and physically assaulted me. He paused. If you need evidence, the entire house is wired with Nest security cameras. The whole thing is on tape. The officer looked up from his notepad. Does it record audio? High-definition video and audio, my dad confirmed. The officer nodded, took down my dad's information, and asked him to step outside to formally sign the police report and press charges. Fiona was slapped in handcuffs. She kept screaming, even while cuffed, that she was going to sue the precinct, that the house was hers, that this was illegal. The cops walked her to the back of the cruiser with the exhausted patience of men who deal with rich lunatics every weekend. My dad walked back inside after signing the paperwork. He closed the front door, locked it, and just stood in the middle of the massive, empty living room for a very long time. I sat down on the sofa nearby. I didn't have anything profound to say. I just sat there in solidarity. After a long silence, without even looking at me, he muttered, "Well, that was the most honest Christmas we've had in a decade." I couldn't argue with that. It was the absolute truth. Over the next few months, all the dominoes fell perfectly into place. My dad filed for a ruthless divorce. He had ironclad proof of infidelity, video evidence of domestic battery, and a crystal-clear audio recording of her admitting she only married him for his money. Fiona spent the night in the county jail. Her brother, who had been at the Christmas party and witnessed the entire freak show, bailed her out the next morning. He looked absolutely miserable. I saw him leave the station with the face of a man who realized his sister was a monster. But family is family. Fiona got out and tried to wage a legal war. That was just her nature. She hired an aggressive lawyer, filed counterclaims, tried to get the security footage thrown out on a technicality, and tried to spin a narrative of emotional abuse. But she had zero personal income to fund a protracted legal battle against a man with bottomless pockets and a smoking gun. The audio confession, the assault video, the 5-year history of fraud, it was a slaughter. A few months later, her lawyer forced her to take a meager settlement. She got a small, basic apartment my dad owned across town, miles away from the country club lifestyle she had called hers for 15 years, and a baseline alimony check. Enough to keep the lights on and buy groceries, but not enough for first-class flights, designer clothes, or the elite status she thought she'd secured forever. And unlike 15 years ago, when she was young and stunning enough to trap a wealthy executive like my dad, time had not been kind to her investment strategy. She didn't have her youth anymore, and the effortless charm of a 5-year-old doesn't hit the same way at 50. Finding another Robert now would be near impossible. She was going to have to actually work for a living to survive. As for me, Lauren filed the petition for an annulment based on fraudulent inducement to marry. Since I owned my condo before the wedding, he had zero legal right to it. The evidence I submitted was a nuclear payload. The text messages, the Uber receipts, the credit card statements showing thousands of marital dollars blown on Beck, and the icing on the cake, the Nest camera footage of Joshua explicitly confessing the entire criminal conspiracy, complete with time and date stamps. Joshua's cheap lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement. Lauren laughed him off the phone. We didn't stop there. Lauren filed the civil suits, one against Joshua for fraud, for conning me into a legally binding contract under false pretenses, and a civil suit against Beck for alienation of affection, proving she maliciously and intentionally engineered the destruction of my marriage. The judge hammered them. They were ordered to pay me. Basher, ling ling ling, have an odor. I have won. Where? H. He's Brox. Has Falk. Ardenheim. A. 1. Aver. Access. And 40 pay. 1 2. Ah. Teldestuck. Rain. Onbend. R9. Enamine. For this. Arden. I'm stored. 2. R. Woo. Wait. Action. I resendi. And grade. No day. 80,000 in punitive and compensatory damages. 40,000 each. They didn't have the cash, obviously, but the judgment was legally attached to their names. Their wages would be garnished. Their credit was nuked, and any asset they acquired in the future would have a lien placed on it. Joshua walked away with absolutely nothing. No house, no wife, massive debt, and a civil judgment hanging around his neck like an anvil. From what I heard through the grapevine, he eventually crawled back to Beck, and she actually let him move in with her. The broke loser moved in with the woman who had spent 5 years meticulously plotting to trap a millionaire. They were stuck together, broke, living in a cramped rental apartment, with my name at the top of their debt collection list. He knows he's not enough for her. He knows he never will be. But he stayed anyway, because a man with zero self-respect will happily eat the scraps thrown to him by a woman who claims to love him, until she finds a better meal ticket, and she will. It's in her DNA. Beck, the grand mastermind who had calculated every single move on the chessboard for years, ended up exactly where she's terrified of being. Shackled to a guy with zero net worth, living in a crappy rental, forced to clock in at a 9-to-5 job every day just to avoid eviction. Oh, and that $1,200 iPhone Pro she handed Bradley with such arrogant flair? I always wonder how high the interest rate is on the credit card she put it on. She's probably still making the minimum payments. Bradley and I bumped into each other entirely by accident a few months later at a Starbucks. We sat down and ended up talking for 2 solid hours. We had a lot of baggage to unpack. 2 people absolutely blindsided and betrayed by the exact same sociopaths, living the exact same lie for years. You bond on a cellular level that nobody else can understand. It wasn't love at first sight. We were both way too traumatized for that. It started as a trauma-bonded friendship, a text here and there, a casual coffee on weekends, that effortless complicity where you don't have to explain why you have trust issues. As the months passed, the coffees turned into dinners. The conversations got deeper. The silences got incredibly comfortable. I noticed that when I laughed with him, my chest didn't feel tight anymore. I noticed the way he looked at me with a steady, quiet respect that I had completely forgotten existed. Nobody rushed it. Nobody forced an agenda. It just grew. Slowly and organically. The way the best things in life do when you finally stop trying to script everything. On a Saturday in November, almost a year after the Christmas Eve massacre, Bradley and I were walking through a high-end luxury mall. We were holding hands, and then I saw them. Beck and Joshua, walking out of a cheap fast fashion store, holding plastic shopping bags. Beck looked different. Not physically, but her aura was totally drained. She had the exhausted, gray energy of someone who is suffocating in a life they hate. She saw me before I had the chance to pretend I hadn't seen her. Her eyes locked onto my face. Then they drifted down to Bradley walking beside me. Then her eyes darted to the shopping bags hanging from my wrist. A Cartier bag. A Louis Vuitton bag. It took her brain about 2 seconds to process the math. And when it finally clicked, the realization hit her face so hard and fast she couldn't hide it. Joshua, completely checked out, kept walking, scrolling on his cracked phone screen, totally oblivious. Beck and I held eye contact for a moment that felt like a lifetime. I gave her a small, effortless smile, the kind of genuine smile you only get when your life is finally exactly where it's supposed to be. She glared back at me with a radioactive hatred that she didn't even try to mask. Because she knew, she understood, better than anyone on the planet, exactly what I was holding on my arm. It wasn't just a wealthy, handsome, fiercely loyal man. It was the exact life she had ruthlessly plotted to steal for herself. It was the grand prize she threw away because she thought she was smarter than everyone else. I squeezed Bradley's arm a little tighter, and we kept walking toward the future the universe had quietly prepared for us. She spent years scheming for a life she didn't deserve, and ended up with the broke loser. And I walked away with the beautiful life I never saw coming. If you made it this far, drop the word "tie" down in the comments. I really love knowing who stuck with me until the very end. Thank you so much for listening to this crazy story. If you enjoyed it, please smash that like button and engage in the comments down below. It really helps the algorithm push the channel to more people. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I've got brand new stories dropping for you every single week. Sending you all a huge hug, and I'll see you in the next one.